You're standing in the kitchen. The kettle hasn't even started making noise yet, and your hand is already in your pocket. You didn't decide to check your phone. There was no thought first. No, let me see if anyone texted. Your thumb just moved. The screen lit up, and you looked at a home screen with nothing new on it. No notification, no red dot, nothing. And you did it anyway. The part you've never said out loud is that this happens dozens of times a day, and half the time there's genuinely nothing to check. You assume this is just a bad habit, a lack of discipline, something a more focused person wouldn't do. But the research on this tells a completely different story. What just happened in that kitchen is one of the most carefully engineered behavioral patterns ever built into a consumer object. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a flaw in you. It was designed, tested, and refined by people who understood exactly how the human attention system works, and who had your specific psychology on a whiteboard while they did it. This isn't about blaming yourself for being weak. It's about understanding what you're actually up against. Let's start with the explanation you've probably already landed on, because it sounds reasonable. You just don't have the discipline you used to have. You could sit through a 3-hour movie in 1995 without touching anything. Now you can't get through a kettle boiling. But here's the problem with that theory. Discipline is domain-specific, and it doesn't explain why the same person who can ignore a ringing landline, skip dessert, or wait patiently in a doctor's office will reach for a phone with zero prompting, zero notification, zero reason. If this were a willpower problem, it would show up everywhere in your life equally. It doesn't. It shows up specifically and overwhelmingly around this one object. So why can you put down a book and not put down a phone that isn't even doing anything? That question has an answer, and it starts with a psychologist named B.F. Skinner. In the 1950s, working with his colleague Charles Foerster, Skinner ran pigeons through a series of experiments with a lever and a food pellet. Sometimes the pellet came after 1 peck, sometimes after 7, sometimes after 2. The pattern was unpredictable. The finding was that unpredictable reward schedules produced far more persistent, harder-to-extinguish behavior than a reward the pigeon could count on. A pigeon getting food on a fixed, predictable schedule would peck, eat, and stop. A pigeon on an unpredictable schedule would keep pecking almost without pause, long after the food stopped coming altogether. Translated into human terms, your brain isn't checking your phone because it expects a reward. It's checking because it can't rule one out, and that uncertainty is the most durable behavioral hook that's ever been documented. That's not a character flaw. That's a nervous system doing exactly what nervous systems do. Now hold on to that, because there's a second mechanism working alongside it. In 2009, a researcher named Sophie Leroy published a study on something she called attention residue. She had people work on one task, then switch to a second, unrelated one, sometimes finishing the first task, sometimes being pulled away from it midstream. What she found was that when people switched tasks before finishing, part of their attention stayed behind on the first task. Not metaphorically, measurably. Their performance on the second task was worse, and it stayed worse, because a portion of their cognitive resources never fully disengaged. Every glance at your phone, even a 4-second one, is a task switch, and your brain doesn't clock back in the moment you look away. It drags a little of that interruption with it into whatever you were doing before. That's already unsettling, but here's where it gets really interesting. In 2017, researchers at the University of Texas, Adrian Mord, Kristen Duke, Ayelet Genizi, and Martin Boss, ran an experiment where they didn't ask anyone to use their phone at all. They just changed where the phone was sitting, face down on the desk, in a pocket or bag, or in a different room entirely. Then they measured cognitive performance on tasks requiring focus and working memory. The people whose phones were in another room outperformed the people whose phones were sitting silent and untouched on the desk beside them. The phone did nothing. It didn't buzz, nobody looked at it. Its mere presence in the room was enough to quietly draw down the mental resources available for the task in front of them. You are not imagining that a phone in the room changes how you think, even when you never touch it. The device doesn't need your attention to take it. To understand why your brain is this vulnerable to an object, it helps to zoom out much further than smartphones. Here's a question almost nobody thinks to ask. Why does novelty feel good in the first place? For most of human history, a sound in the grass or a stranger on the horizon wasn't a distraction. It was information that could keep you alive. Checking, scanning, noticing what changed since the last time you looked, that circuitry is roughly 200,000 years old. It evolved to monitor a world where new information was rare and worth interrupting everything else to catch. We didn't build that system for a device that manufactures new information every 4 seconds. And this is where the two sides meet. The circuitry is ancient. The mechanism exploiting it is not. The pull to refresh gesture, the swipe that makes an app reload, was created by a designer named Lauren Brichter in 2009. He said openly in interviews years later that he never set out to build something addictive, but that he came to see the gesture for what it functionally is, the same motion as pulling the arm of a slot machine, for a reward that is just as uncertain. The engineer who invented the infinite scroll, Asa Raskin, has said something similar about his own creation, that optimizing purely for ease of use, without asking what it would be used for, was a mistake he didn't fully understand until it was already running on billions of phones. Neither of them built these features to trap you, but once the pattern existed, it worked exactly the way Skinner's pigeons predicted it would. Now I want to tell you about a study that nobody talks about, because the finding seems to work against everything you've just heard. That Texas brain drain study, the one where a phone sitting silently on the desk was enough to lower performance, became one of the most cited papers in this entire field. But when other researchers tried to replicate it a few years later, using the same tasks and the same conditions, they couldn't reproduce the effect. No measurable difference showed up between people who had their phone on the desk, in a bag, or out of the room. On the surface, that looks like the whole idea falls apart. But here's the deeper truth underneath it. The original researchers had already found that the effect was strongest in people who scored high on smartphone dependence and weak or absent in people who didn't. Averaged across everyone in a different sample, that effect can wash out. This is where an honest answer matters more than a tidy one. The size of this effect is genuinely disputed among researchers, and anyone who tells you it's settled science in one direction or the other is oversimplifying it. What isn't disputed is the mechanism underneath it. Task switching costs and attention residue are two of the most replicated findings in cognitive psychology. The phone doesn't affect every person in every setting the same amount, but for the people whose relationship with the device runs deepest, the pull is real, and it's measurable. There's one last thing I need to tell you, and it might be the most important part of this video. Watch for the moment you reach for your phone with no destination in mind. Not to check a message you're expecting, not to look something up. Just a reach, a glance, a small, compulsive scan of a screen that has nothing waiting on it. That specific pattern, checking with no target, is the clearest behavioral sign that a variable reward loop has taken over a moment that used to belong to boredom, or rest, or simply standing in a kitchen waiting for water to boil. It isn't a diagnosis, and it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means a habit loop, built by people who study human attention for a living, has quietly attached itself to the gaps in your day. If you notice it happening constantly in a way that genuinely troubles you, that's worth a conversation with a professional. Not because you're broken, but because you deserve to spend your attention on purpose. Your attention is the one resource you can't get more of. It's the only currency you spend without ever seeing the bill. So the next time you're standing in a kitchen, waiting for a kettle, and you feel your hand moving toward your pocket before you've decided anything, you'll know what's actually happening. You are not weak-willed. You are not undisciplined. You are not losing your grip the way aging is supposed to take it from you. You are a person with 200,000-year-old circuitry standing next to an object engineered by very smart people to exploit exactly that circuitry, using a schedule of reward first mapped out on pigeons in a lab in the 1950s. It was never your discipline. It was never your age. It was never you. That was always the design, and now you can see it. If this changed how you look at the thing in your pocket, subscribe and tell me in the comments, what's the moment in your day when you catch your own hand moving before your mind does? Next time, I want to show you why the version of yourself that exists at 11 p.m. makes completely different decisions than the version that exists at 11 a.m. and it has almost nothing to do with tiredness.